Okay, so now we're on example 2 of the activity. We already conquered number 1, which was pretty epic. Alright, so for the next one, we're going to factor the polynomial and then find the zeros and say how many are real and how many are imaginary. And remember, if we did it correctly, the degree should equal the total amount of real and imaginary zeros that we get. Okay, so let's get going. So remember, the first step whenever we start factoring is to factor out the GCF first. Okay, so let's just even see if there is one. If there's not one, we just keep going. So let's see, is there anything in common between all 3 terms? Well, let's look at the numbers first, or our coefficients, the numbers in front of the variables. Okay, which on my first one, since I don't see a number in front of my x squared secretly, there's a 1 there. Okay, so I have a 1, 6, and 9. Now, the only thing that goes into 1, 6, and 9 is 1. So I can't really factor out any numbers other than 1. And remember, we don't really use 1 as a GCF. Okay, so let's move on to the variables. Okay, so I got an x squared and x, and then I don't have an x. Okay, so I don't even have x's in all the terms, so I cannot factor out an x, because in order to factor out an x using the GCF factoring, they have to have one in each term, which I don't. Okay, so there just isn't a GCF, which is okay. Okay, it's okay. So this one does not have a GCF, so no GCF. No big deal. When you don't have a GCF, you just keep trying to find other ways to factor. So we see here, I have 3 terms, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So when we have 3 terms, there are 2 options. Okay? We can do our slide and divide technique, which is called general factoring, or we can use the quadratic formula. Either way, which when you do the quadratic formula, that actually finds the zeros for you because it says x equals something. If you guys remember, zeros are when we have x equal to something. X equals 0 here, and x equals plus or minus I root 25. Okay, so I personally am going to use slide and divide because I think it's a little faster than the quadratic formula, and I'm all about being efficient in math. But if you like the quadratic formula, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with the quadratic formula. Okay, so if you want to use the quadratic formula and you need to see the formula, you can pause the video and kind of copy it down, which that's an A right there. I know it kind of doesn't look like an A. Divided by 2A, that should be included. Okay, but anyways, I'm going to slide and divide, so let's get going. Okay, so first, okay, I'm first going to identify my A, B, and C, because that always helps. Okay, so my A is the 1, the number in front of the x squared. My b is the number in front of the x, which is a 6. And my c is the number without the variable, which is the 9, or the constant term. Remember, guys, constant terms are when it doesn't have a variable. Okay? So, let's keep on going. Keep going. Okay. Alright, so first, we slide A to C. We slide. Okay, which the slide, we slide with the 1. Okay, which means eventually we're going to divide. So I'm going to slide the 1 to the 9, which means we multiply. Okay, 1 times 9 is 9. So when we start by finding 2 numbers that multiply to be A times C. This was the slide part. We slid A to C, which is multiplying. And then don't forget though, you guys, we're going to be dividing at the very end, which I'm going to write my final answer over here so we have some space. Okay, which remember, when we have our slide and divide, okay, we always have x's in our parenthesis. Okay, and since we're finding zeros, when we find zeros or roots or x-intercepts, we always set this equal to 0, because I want to know when y equals 0 or f of x equals 0. Okay, if you think about the x-axis, you guys, all the y values on the x are 0. So our x-intercepts are when y is 0. It's also kind of the opposite of what you think. When we find x-intercepts, the y is 0, or f of x. When we find y-intercepts, the x's are 0. So that's kind of the way I remember it. So y-intercepts, you make x 0. X-intercepts, you make y 0. Okay, so we set that bad boy equal to 0. Okay, so we slid A to C. We slide by A, and then we're going to divide by A, which my A is 1. Divide by A. Okay, so let's go over here. So we slide A times C, which A times C, 1 times 9 is 9. And then remember, we have to find 2 numbers that add to be B, which is 6. Alright guys, let's get going. So 2 numbers that multiply to be 6, and, multiply to be 9, and add to be 6. Holy hot dog, you guys are so smart. It is 3 and 3. 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 plus 3 is 6. Okay, and remember, you guys, these are the numbers we put in our parentheses. Okay, so since they're both positive 3s, we're going to be adding 3 both times. So plus 3 and plus 3. This is a 3. Okay, next up, you guys, we simplify. So let's simplify this thing. So 3 divided by 1 gives me 3. So it'll be x plus 3. And 3 divided by 1 will give me 3. Alright, as the last step when we find zeros, we just set each parenthesis equal to 0 and solve. Just like we did up here. We set the x equal to 0 and the x squared plus 25 equal to 0. Okay? So we're going to have x plus 3 equals 0 and x plus 3 equals 0. Alright, which really, you guys, since these are the same things, when we solve one, we'll already know the answer for the other. So I'm only going to solve for one of them, and it should repeat over since they're the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to move my 3 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract the 3 because the opposite of positive 3 is negative 3. So 3 minus 3 cancels out and turns to 0, and 0 minus 3 is negative 3. So we get x equal to negative 3, or, which this is the same thing, so it should equal the same thing. Alright guys, so even though we have the same answer, these count as 2 zeros. Okay, so this is a double root. Okay, so my factored form is this right here. These are my zeros. So this is factored form, which I could actually simplify this down, you guys. Since I have 2 of the same terms, I could write this as x plus 3 squared, since there are 2 of them. Okay, so this, you guys, is factored form. These are my zeros. Okay? So there's a difference. We're constantly going to be talking about factored form. This is what we got when we factored. This is what we got when we found the zeros. Okay, so we have 2 zeros. Okay, so, and since these don't have i's with them, they are both real. So I have 2 real. I didn't get any answers with i's in them, so I have 0 imaginary zeros. Okay? Now, be careful, you guys. There are 2 zeros, but only 1 solution. Okay, solution means how many different answers did you get? Okay, we only got 1 different answer. I only got x to be negative 3. Okay, so there's 1 solution, which is x equals negative 3, but there are 2 zeros. So be careful. Okay, there is a difference, and that should be a negative 3. Okay, so there are 2 real, 0 imaginary. The degree of the polynomial, we're going to go back to the original problem to find the degree. And the degree, remember you guys, is the highest exponent. So the highest exponent that I see is a 2. Okay, so the degree is 2, and that should equal how many total zeros we have, which 2 plus 0 gives me 2 total zeros. So I have 2 zeros and a degree of 2, and they are the same. So yay, we did it correctly, you guys. Awesome. Okay, and sorry, I'm going to close that parenthesis. Alright, so these are our zeros. X equals negative 3, x equals negative 3, and this is factored form. Holy hot dog, you guys. That was awesome.